Hi everybody, Steve Hoffman here. Today I'm going to share with you a little known secret on how you can increase your bat-in and pitch-in speed, distance, power, accuracy and consistency in literally just about 5 minutes. This exercise has been perfected over the past 15 years by some of the best athletes in the world. But of course, they don't talk about it because it actually works. Now, whether you play golf, baseball, soccer, football, tennis, or any other sport, movement of your body is the single biggest determinant as to how good you're going to perform. In order to maximize your performance, you need your movement to be fast, powerful, accurate, and consistent. And to achieve this, you need two things in addition to just having big muscles. First, you need to reduce movement resistance, or another way to say it is, you need to increase your ease of motion. Now, just to illustrate this, if I was to ask you just to rotate your body from side to side, but do it in such a way that you're hardly using any muscles. Now, in my case here, if I was to rotate from side to side without hardly any muscles, this is about as far as I can go. But this is not my end of range of motion. This is just about how far I can go without hardly using any force. If I want to go all the way, well, now I have to fire my muscles to get into that to get towards my end of range of motion. And ideally, I want to be able to go all the way without any force. Okay, so that's the first thing that you need. And then, of course, the second thing that you want to achieve is an increase in range of motion. Ideally, the further you can go, the better your performance will be. Okay, so in order to increase both ease of motion and range of motion, most coaches typically recommend stretching or some sort of variation of stretching. Now, common to all stretching techniques is the belief that if you grab a muscle from one end, grab it from the other end, and use brute force to pull it apart, you'll actually increase range of motion. The fundamental problem with this belief is that it completely ignores the neurology and the basic reason as to why muscles are tight to begin with. You see, typically muscles are not tight because anything's wrong with them internally, but rather because the brain actually wants them to be tight. So while you're trying to elongate your muscles, your brain is trying to shorten them. And a good analogy to this is basically sit in your car, put one foot on the gas, one foot on the brakes, and press them both at the same time. And sometimes you'll go where you want to go, sometimes you won't go where you want to go, and other times you'll actually break something. And the same thing will actually happen with our body. There are a lot of injuries directly related to stretching. Now, to understand why the brain wants our muscles to be tight, it's important to understand what is core stability. Now, core stability is the mechanism within our body that keeps us balanced and prevents our joints from moving out of bounds. This is really important because our bodies are inherently unstable. We're top heavy, and worst off, we're kind of like a stick being held on the tip of a finger. Actually, our balance is much more challenged than a stick because we're more like a chain being held from the bottom. So just imagine I had a stick on the tip of my finger. I could balance it, but in order to do so, I'd have to move my finger very rapidly from side to side in order to keep it from falling down. Now imagine I wanted to balance a chain on the tip of my finger. Okay? In order to do this, I would need to start off by balancing the first link in the chain. Okay? Then I would need to have some sort of a motor unit under the second link that would do the same as my finger in order to prevent the second link from tipping over. Then I'd have to do the same with each successive link in the chain all the way up to the top. Now, this is an almost perfect analogy as to how our spine keeps itself balanced and upright. Under each vertebrae in our spine, we have special muscles that sole goal is to keep the vertebrae above it balanced and prevent it from falling beyond its natural range of motion. For these muscles to achieve these two tasks, balance and limit movement, they need to be fast twitching and they need to be working non-stop all day long. Because preventing ourselves from falling down is not something that's done only when we exercise. Of course, these muscles also need to be in the right place to do their job. These muscles are generally referred to as core stabilization muscles. They are very small muscles and they interconnect anywhere between 2 to 5 adjoining vertebrae. We have about 180 of them out of about 680, and they're wrapped around our spine within about 1 inch radius from our spine. In contrast to these core stabilization muscles, we also have locomotive muscles, which are primarily tasked with movement. These muscles are big, slow twitching, can accelerate from 0 to 100 very fast, but aren't built to work all day long. When forced into this, they'll spasm and cramp. Okay, so now that you know what core stability is, you can see how a deficiency in it would cause balance problems and disc failure as spinal joints would move out of bounds. As a side point, mistakenly, most people think compression causes disc failure. In fact, it is the movement of spinal joints out of bounds that are the primary cause of disc failure. To the extreme, if spinal joints were to completely move out of bounds, we would die. But this doesn't happen thanks to a miraculous protective mechanism we have in our bodies. When our brains detect deficiencies in core stability, it tightens up our locomotive muscles in the vicinity of the instability, effectively using our locomotive muscles as supportive brace to protect the vulnerable area. The problem with this protective mechanism is that the locomotive muscles are not suited for stabilization. They don't control specific joints. They're not built to be firing all day long, non-stop. And when used for stabilization, they're not available for what they need to be done, which is movement, which causes many other problems. Essentially, when this protective mechanism is kicked in, the brain replaces a critically dangerous situation with a not so good situation. This explains why our muscles are tight, why stretching doesn't help, and why increasing core stability dramatically increases ease of motion and range of motion. But how to do this? How to increase core stability? Well, this is the million-dollar question. Actually, it's more like the billion-dollar question. Researchers have been working for over 20 years trying to find out how to increase core stability. Health insurance companies have spent literally billions of dollars on treating patients with techniques that initial studies showed promising results, but later were dismissed. About 15 years ago, a small Silicon Valley company called Back Project Corporation presented a very simple exercise called ATM2 for increasing core stability. By the way, ATM stands for Active Therapeutic Movements. As would be expected, results included immediate and dramatic increases in ease of motion and range of motion, which led to instantaneous increases in batting and pitching speed, distance, accuracy, power, and consistency. Immediate pain elimination of back, neck, shoulder, hip, pelvis, and knee pain was also shown, but that's a topic of another presentation. Although this was an instant hit for many world-class athletes, sports teams, trainers, and clinicians who have not stopped raving about it since then, many professional trainers and clinicians refuse to use it. I've been told it's because it works too good and they may be afraid it might threaten their livelihood. For researchers, most are typically just not interested in studying anything they didn't invent themselves. But despite all this, articles in Golf Week magazine, Golf Digest, research papers, and even a couple books have been written and published about it. Despite it being 15 years since this exercise was originally presented to professional trainers and clinicians, now is the first time we're presenting it directly to the general public, you included. In the second part of this presentation, I'll be revealing the specifics of how a simple exercise can increase core stability to immediately increase ease of motion and range of motion which instantly increases speed, distance, power, accuracy, and consistency, while at the same time reducing the risks of future injuries. These results are so dramatic. If you do this exercise, your next game will be the best game. Please click the button below to register to the second part of this presentation. Also, you'll receive a time-limited free offer to actually receive a free session with our health professionals at our Sunnyvale offices. You'll not want to miss this. It's like an out-of-this-world experience when you suddenly feel young, light, tall, and agile, just like you did when you were in your early 20s. So please, register now while it's hot in your mind and while our free offers are still available. This exercise is so potent, it also eliminates the most common back, neck, shoulder, hip, and knee pains in just a few minutes. But as I just mentioned a minute ago, that's the topic of another presentation. As an additional bonus, for registering right now, we'll also send you a copy of a paper we wrote about 10 years ago, which provides a scientific explanation as to how and why this ATM2 exercise is able to immediately increase ease of motion, increase range of motion, and eliminate pain. Thank you for your time watching this presentation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.